so no issues there. And you heard, I hope you heard the beep, so we are live. And I will turn off my camera because you don't have to look at me constantly waving my head and hands and everything. Today, as I mentioned, we will very briefly review what we discussed last week, and we discussed what historical linguistics is as a branch of linguistics, how it developed, what its main concerns are. And that lecture, if you watched it and learned the key, let's say, elements of it, is enough for one exercise out of 10 in your final exam. After today's lecture, you will learn about 2 additional questions. You will have to learn, of course, after the lecture, but then already 30% of the exam is covered. So let me show you. I decided not to show you the whole exam, but I decided that we should actually, I think it's the best idea to show you one question or 2 questions relevant for each lecture. So then you can see how each lecture and each practice contributes to the final grade and what you can be asked in the final exam. So here's a sample of question number 1, and this really is the first question in the written exam. For example, last year in January, this was the question. Why is August Schleicher an important figure in the development of historical linguistics? So does anybody remember August, who was born in 1821 and died in 1868? He died relatively young, but his ideas live on. So anybody remembers, or would you like me to say it?
Because of the family tree, language family tree, and proto-language theory.
Perfect. So you just don't write it as these isolated phrases, but you can say something like August Schleicher was heavily influenced by Darwin's theory of evolution, and he was the first linguist to propose the family tree theory, and that languages branch into separate branches in the sense of ancestry. So he was the one who also introduced the notion of proto-language, the one that is the ancestor of all languages. Perfect. So just one comment. This is absolutely the right answer. Just expand it a little bit, like, full sentences, and then you get full points. So each question, we are not making, this is democracy. Every question is worth 10 points. So 10 questions, 10 points, 100 points in total. It's clear. If you mention the family theory, the Darwin's theory that he was influenced with, and maybe proto-language, for extra points, you can mention that he was the one who introduced the reconstructed form. He's the one who came up with the asterisk in front of it. Then, if you maybe don't get 10 points in some other exercise, you will get extra points in the first one, so we can compensate. So there are also extra points. Great, thank you. I'm really happy that you are following, and so already 10% of the exam you're ready. Another possible question is, for example, who was let's say, I don't know, Sir William Jones, but in the very next slide, I will actually talk about William Jones, so no need for it. Okay, perfect. So now the real lecture. So today we will talk about language families, and we will introduce sound changes and language and sound shifts. So language families as an idea goes back to Schleicher, but actually Schleicher was working on the hypothesis that was formulated by the founding father of historical linguistics, Sir William Jones. And here you have the full quote, not the part of the quote which I gave you in the first lecture. So this is actually the full quote, and you can see the spelling is also interesting. The Sanskrit language spelled with C, so Sanskrit, a language, whatever be its antiquity, is a more wonderful structure, more perfect than the Greek, more copious than the Latin, more exquisitely refined than either, yet bearing to both to them stronger affinity, both in the roots of verbs and the forms of grammar, than could possibly have been produced by accident. So this is the birth of historical linguistics. So strong indeed that no philologist could examine them all three without believing them to have sprung from some common source. This, according to Schleicher himself, was one of the key, let's say, seeds for his idea of the family tree. And then William Jones mentioned, which perhaps no longer exists. So again, you know, this is what Schleicher used as an idea to later develop his theory of proto-language, that you can reconstruct the proto-language. And there is a similar reason, though not quite so forcible, for supposing that both the Gothic and the Celtic, though blended with a very different idiom, had the same origin with the Sanskrit, and the Old Persian might be added to the same family. And here you see the very first mention. So we say it was August Schleicher who created the theory of family tree in linguistics, but in a way he stole the show from William Jones, who mentioned the idea of a family. So the research after that was focused on these languages, and we know that they are just one of several language families in the world. And of course, we are talking about the Indo-European family of languages. And this is actually what you will have in the exam. So we will focus on the Indo-European family of languages. If you remember Professor Novakov's course from the first year, you dealt with various families, including, I don't know, Malamute languages of Alaska, but and also the dogs are named Malamutes because of the language and the tribes. But we are not here in this course. We are because this is, after all, the study of English, and historical linguistic introduction focuses on English. So, and this prepares you for the next semester when you can take course with Tanya in the history of the English language. So we focus on the Indo-European family. So everything that is orange here is actually Indo-European family of languages. So this slide is the reason why it's called Indo-European family of languages. But if you move a little bit to, you know, to the east, you see the reason why it's called Indo-European family of languages, because these are the languages that are spoken in the present day Iran, and of course also, if you go further to the east, in the northern parts of India. So the only non-orange sections here, and of course this is a historical map. Russia, of course, speaks Indo-European language. It's a Slavic language, Russian. So this is, let's say, actually a map that is historically based, so from old times. This is not really the present day map, so it's a couple of centuries old. So the only languages that are not Indo-Iranian in our close proximity, there's Hungarian, belonging to the Ugro-Finnic branch, and of course in Finland you have the other parts of that Ugro-Finnic family, so Finnish language. And then as you move to the east, of course, there's India, where again the northern parts of India, where originally you had the main languages of the Indian branch of the Indo-Iranian family. In the next slide, you will see the most famous one, and these are Hindi, Bengali, Gujarati, Rajasthani, Marathi, and of course the purple, or is that, I don't know colors, but the southern part of India is actually Dravidian languages, and they influenced Indo-Iranian languages in the north of India, so that many features that you see in Hindi, they do not exist in the European part of the Indo-European family. But the main question here is, how do we know that they are really related? How do we know that all these languages, from English and Norwegian to Hindi and Gujarati, are really related? So we call it a family, right? It's an Indo-European family of language. What is the most common feature of a family? Let me illustrate with something I found on in Google Photos. Family is always about resemblance. You can see that in this group of 4 people, 2 probably belong to the same family, right? So because they look the same, or actually not the same, but very similar, you will never, you will never think that, let's say, I'm not supposed to use the highlighter, but you will never think that this gentleman is related to this gentleman. It's more likely that these 2 are more closely related, and these 2, of course, again, are closely related. They could be distant relatives, the 4 of them, but you see where the resemblance is. So let's see some examples of this resemblance. What do we mean by it? So let's look at Latin. You all probably, most of you had Latin in high school. Maybe not, but some of you probably did. So this is the tooth in Latin. It's dens, dentis, denti, dentem. I'm not good at pronouncing Latin. And then, you know, how William Jones came to this idea that they came from the same root. Well, look at the paradigm in Sanskrit. Instead of dens, you have dan. Instead of dentis, you have datas. Instead of denti, you have date. Instead of dentem, you have dantam. And then what again William Jones did was look at Greek. These are exactly the languages that William Jones was looking at. And then you notice odon, odontos, odonti, odonta. So if you forget about vowels, because vowels are always bound to change. So vowels are generally very changeable. So let's forget about the vowels and look at the consonant. You see, you always have the, you'd have the, you have the again, the, and here again, there's constantly the, there's n here, right? And there's n here. There's t consistently here and t consistently here, and there's t again consistently here. And then look at the suffixes. Even the suffixes are the same. S, m, m, and here there's no m. And we can forget about this o here. That's a Greek development. It's actually completely you know, separate development. So just forget about the vowels. And this is actually what we mean by family resemblance. You see that these, you know, languages have the same consonants and consonant clusters like nt, the same suffixes like s and m for accusative, and that is the family resemblance. And then what you know, other historical linguists did was simply follow this train of thought and compare other languages. So things that are not so often compared, or were not so often compared in the early periods of historical linguistics, like English and Italian, and then French and Swedish and German and Welsh and Persian and Hindi. And then, what they noticed is sometimes you seem to have differences that are relatively strange. So, for example, here you have san, and here instead of the, which is predominant in most Indo-European languages, in Germanic languages like Swedish and English, of course, you have instead of the, you have t. And then, what they did was they compared that, these consonants, they compared that to what we know about the production of consonants in terms of place and manner of articulation. And when you look at that, you notice that it's actually not that difficult to move from t to d, or theoretically from tooth to san here. So it's not very likely, for example, and there are no languages where you will move from t to, let's say, this. That's not possible. So this comparison gave rise to everything that you will hear later in this course. So once they noticed these similarities, they started wondering how the differences came to be. What triggered these small changes, so that what in some languages you have the, and then suddenly in some languages this the changes to t, and in one language then t changes to ch or ts. Uh, and of course, this was always about similarities and explaining the differences by looking at what seems logical. So that's why I will delete this. So this was never possible. What was possible was for the to change to t, and t to ch or ts or z. And the question is, how did this happen? Well, the explanation, and this can be part again of the written exam, but very rarely. The explanation right now, the most dominant theory that we have on how Indo-European languages developed is that originally what we now know as Indo-European languages were spoken somewhere in the steppes of Eastern Russia, what is today Eastern Russia. We think that around 4000 BC, so these days we are celebrating 6,000 years of the Indo-European family of languages, we actually all, or not we, our languages came from something called the Kurgan culture. So this Kurgan culture is specific because we don't have time for this. Unfortunately, this is a nice lecture in its own. So the common Indo-European lexical stock. But for example, I will just give you one example. All Indo-European languages have the same words or the same roots for words such as winter, cold, bear, birch tree, breza. But we don't have the common words for beach. We don't have the common words for the palm trees. We don't have the common words for anything that's related to the sandy beaches, summer vacations, living the relaxed and chill life. So this, for example, gives us a high degree of confidence that the original Indo-European population lived somewhere there where it was really cold. There were a lot of bears, a lot of birch trees, and there are also other concepts of flora and fauna which clearly tell us that this was in the steppes, somewhere where it was cold. And based on also DNA evidence from the last 10 years, additional archaeological evidence, it's now more or less agreed on, but there are still disagreements that this is where they came from, the Proto-Indo-European people, the Kurgan culture. There are still some, dwellings preserved in the steppes of Russia of the Kurgan culture, and then they moved in two directions. Some of them said, okay, we've had enough of this cold weather and constantly battling the bears, so let's move to the south and find some sun. But some of them moved to, to the south, but to the west, and some of them moved to the south, but to the east, to the southeast. And this is what actually gave us the European and the Indian branch of the Indo-European languages. So up to that point, they all spoke the same language. As they started migrating and they split, this gave birth to the Indian and the European branch of the family. And then within each branch, you actually have encoded the history of these cultures. So as soon as you see a new branch, you know that these people separated from this migration at a specific time. So every time we mention that there's a branch of the Indo-European family, for example, in the European branch, there is a sub-branch of Germanic languages. They all have the same features, and that tells us that along these migrations, at one point, they simply split from the rest of them. These similarities between branches are actually, they tell you about history that is lost to the written record. Sometimes these days you discover some similarities that you were completely unaware of. Let me just give you an example. So we think that Germanic tribes and Slavic tribes, including today's, let's say, Serbian, Croatian population, and people in Bosnia, that we actually migrated together, Germanic tribes and Slavic tribes. And there's a very peculiar word that you would not normally think of that shows you this. So today, the word for a sword in English is sword, right? But do you know what the Old English word for a sword is? Anybody? Don't ask Google. Okay, if you don't know, and I would be surprised if you knew actually, because this is not common knowledge. So sorry, I cannot turn on my pen. So in Old English, this is actually the code for, sorry, why doesn't it work? Sorry. In Old English, the word was written like this. But if I tell you that this C at the end was palatalized, and then it was pronounced as ch, does that sound similar to anything you know from Serbian? So it was actually not ma, yeah, it was mace. There was a suffix a at the end. Mace is much. You will not see that same word anywhere else. It's only in Germanic and in Slavic languages. So, for example, words like this tell you this distant history. So, although we don't have written evidence that our tribes actually migrated together, because that's lost in the chaos of pre-Roman times and migrations outside the Roman Empire that kept track of these things. These words, and this is still being researched, these words that are common among some groups, but not all groups, they tell you about common migrations and which tribes moved together. So, Hitler was wrong on many fronts, and one of the, he would be really pissed off to hear that actually he didn't think that Slavic people were, like Aryan race, but actually Germanic tribes and Slavic tribes are very good friends in the earliest periods of Germanic and Slavic migration. So that's this family resemblance. And for example, why are Germanic languages considered a separate branch? Because you saw it with dentis, don't. So for example, all other Indo-European languages usually have the in the word, such as tooth. But it is Germanic languages that have some other consonants in those positions. So in Indo-European languages, you have, for example, pater, but in Germanic it's never p, it's f. So you have father, and in German it's fata. In Icelandic it's again with f, with f. Wherever in Indo-European you have t, in Germanic you have th. So it's tenuous, but in Germanic it's thin. It's tricolor, or whatever it's pronounced. In Germanic it's three. In Indo-European you have, and in all Indo-European, especially Centum group, you have the, like decem, but in Germanic you have 10. And these are these similarities. Similarly, we don't have to go into details. For example, all Celtic languages, Irish, Scottish, Gaelic, Welsh, Breton, Cornish, Manx, they have certain characteristics that are completely different from the rest of the Indo-European family. So, for example, in Celtic, you say cat is a calf, but his, her is a. That's like determiner. And then when you say his cat, the presence of this determiner a changes the pronunciation of cat based on the gender and the number of the pronouns. So you don't pronounce it as a cat, you say a gath. But if it's her cat, you don't say a gath, you say a chat. This is, of course, completely non-existent in other Indo-European branches. And for things like these, Celtic languages are separated from the rest of the Indo-European family as a separate branch inside it. So there are conservative and liberal languages. Let's not go into politics, but let me show you, for example, Lithuanian. In Lithuanian, you have, again, this is a tooth, dantis, danties, danciui, danti, dantuye, dantimi, dantie. And you can see that for every single case, there's fundamentally a different suffix or a combination of vowels and consonants in the suffix. And you can distinctly identify every case by just looking at the ending. And if you know Latin, you know that this is exactly the way it was in Latin. The similar stuff was happening, and it's actually taken in a way from Sanskrit. So conservative languages, those that look like old Indo-European languages, have all these rich suffixes. Serbian is actually like that. It's a conservative language. We have most of the features of Indo-European, what we think is a proto-language. But then, you have languages that kind of, consider these things too complex, and then, try to simplify things. And then one of those, let's say, more advanced languages that diverted from the conservative roots is Spanish. So in Spanish, you see diente, del diente, al diente, diente, sobre el diente, con el diente, ai diente, but it's always diente. So you see, this is the other extreme. So in terms of the development, we can talk about conservative languages that let's say retained most of the features that were found in ancient examples of Indo-European languages like Sanskrit and Latin. But then you have languages that really developed further, and usually that means simplification. Just look at English, for example. That's an even more extreme example. So you have, these conservative and liberal languages, so to say, and then you also have what we could call black sheep languages. This is actually taken from a book that I don't completely agree with, and this is a movie that's terrible movie about human killing sheep. So 3.2 on Internet Movie Database. But these languages are languages that if you didn't know enough details, you would never consider them Indo-European. And the reason for that is that these languages were usually influenced by a variety of other languages. So let me show you some examples. So Albanian and Armenian are considered not black sheep in this sense that they are bad, but they are actually black sheep in the sense that you really have to stretch a lot of your, cognitive muscle to show why they are Indo-European languages, because their features, their phonology, it's all quite different from the rest of the Indo-European family, and they are called isolates because they don't resemble any other branch inside the Indo-European family. So let me just give you example of this, this difference. So, for example, if you look at these numbers, so English, French, Spanish, German, you see, we know that this was a Germanic development here. So, but it's usually the or a sound that is related to the. And then in Armenian, wow, suddenly you have erku, completely unrelated, borrowed from other languages. Then for three, it's always something with t or a development of t to d, which we saw are actually close by. And then in Armenian, you have erek. And then with four, again, Albanian is here quite similar. But for example, Armenian is really weird. So you see here, Chork is actually like Chetiri. It could be, that it was influenced by Slavic languages. But most of, but even in, let's say, Albanian, then you start seeing differences as you start moving from 1, 2, 3 to higher numbers. So, for example, here you see that Albanian and Armenian really deviate from the common pattern that you see in, let's call it, well-behaved or standard Indo-European languages. And the same applies to more or less 8 as well. 8, 9 in Albanian is actually, again, very Indo-European, but Armenian is not. And when you look at the sounds in Armenian and Albanian for 6, 7, 8, in Armenian also 2, 3, and 5, you see that this was not possible, that Armenian simply, couldn't develop the forms of numbers by sound changes. So in this case, there is no resemblance. And the explanation for some of these differences, why there is no resemblance, is that some languages, especially of tribes that migrated a lot, were influenced by languages spoken in the south of India, Dravidian languages like Tamil or Kannada, and that actually created these different features. So that's actually, what I have to say. This is how we developed the whole theory of Indo-European languages, what similarities people were looking at. And now there's only one question. How do we know anything about the language which I mentioned a couple of minutes ago and many times before that? And that's Proto-Indo-European. So today you can find dictionaries of Proto-Indo-European roots online, completely free. So you are really fortunate. When I was a student, you had to, find photocopies somewhere, from a friend of yours who had copies made in England and then brought here on the plane, paying extra baggage fees and so on. These days it's all available, And I just want to show you how actually fortunate we are, because these dictionaries have embedded in themselves probably a combined total of several centuries of work. So I mentioned the common European lexical stock. So one of the common words for all Indo-European languages is sister-in-law. Here you have the word in, for example, Sanskrit and Russian, and I think you can recognize the word in Serbian. So this is pronounced in Sanskrit as snusa, and in Russian snakha. Does it sound like anything you know from Serbian?
Yeah, of course, Naya.
Snaya, yes, this is Snaya. Armenian, again, you can see the black sheep. It lost S and it lost a bunch of suffixes, but you see the consonant is still there. The key consonant N is there. So these days, and of course, there was a difference, sometimes the difference in meaning. So in Albanian and Armenian, it's actually bride. But we know why it's bride, sister-in-law. Is supposed to be brided, right? So let's think about how people came up with these Proto-Indo-European roots. So you look at all these seven, and you wonder what was it like in Proto-Indo-European, times when Proto-Indo-European was spoken in the steppes of Russia by the oh my God, I forgot now, the Kurgan culture. By the way, Kurgans are available in popular culture. Do you know the movie Highlander? Has anybody seen Highlander?
Yes.
So, you know, the evil guy in
Yes.
Highlander, he's a Kurgan, by the way. He's a Kurgan, so that's like he's so old. He's like 6,000 years old. He's a Kurgan warrior. So from the times when Indo-European was still one language. So what was it in those days? Well, it couldn't been any of these seven words, right? They are separate developments of that root. So then what linguists, and that's when I mentioned that these are hundreds of combined years of thinking, arguing, agreeing, what could have been the first sound? Some begin with sn, right? Some begin with n. So did the Proto-Indo-European begin in sn, or did it begin in n? What do you think?
I think N.
That's a possibility, but what do you think? Do languages normally get new consonants in the development of our history, or they lose consonants? Huh? So are you more likely to add h to chleb or to delete h from chleb and say leb?
Yeah, probably losing the sounds because of simplicity.
Yes, so actually, and this is what happened with suffixes. You saw Spanish, they lost all the suffixes. English lost 90% of suffixes, many prefixes. So languages, when they seek efficiency and simplification, they lose stuff. They don't gain stuff. Only humans gain stuff, you know, especially during pandemic, I gained 5 kilograms. We think that originally, and this is again August Schleicher, he would be proud of us, we use the asterisk to mark that this is a reconstructed form. So it was probably sn. So the roots probably started in sn. What about the second vowel? So it's a vowel. In some languages that I showed you here, it's u. In some languages, it's o. Either way, it's a back vowel. A, o, and u, when you pronounce them right, they come from your throat. A, o, u, they are back vowels, and they are layered. They are, you know, like low, mid, and high back vowels. So if it was o, how come that so many changed in u? So, of course, I nudged the data, so I didn't present you with all the languages. But, you know, just appreciate that, you know, linguists, historical linguists over the last 2 centuries, they looked at literally hundreds of languages and dialects, compared the roots, compared historical forms of words. And when you look at all the data, not just this that is listed here, you see that actually the majority had U. So you think, we then think, you know, according to this majority rule, it was probably U. So it was SNU. Okay, what about the third sound? The third sound is either S in Sanskrit, snusa, it's H, like in Russian, it's K in Russian, like old Russian, snaha. So it is either S or this H. In Old English, it's R. In you know, Latin, it's R again. In Greek, there's nothing there. In Albanian, it's S. So you cannot really, you know, consider what the majority is. And now I can tell you actually R in snoru, Old English, and R in nurus in Latin are peculiar. They actually are specific developments of S in Old English and in Latin. So this R that you have in Old English and Latin, it actually came from S. So people were looking at these things, and then you also, you know, have the same rule in Russian, that from the very first forms of Russian, this k was actually originally s. And when you compare this, and you have to know sound changes, historical sound changes of all these languages, then you get to know that this was actually probably s back then. So in the Kurgans probably used the consonant s. So it was snus. And then we come to the final sound. If in most well-behaved Indo-European languages, the feminine suffix was always a. In Serbian as well, žena, right? So we think that this word, you know, intuitively you would think, okay, it was probably a feminine word, so probably the suffix was a, because most Indo-European languages have, you know, for feminine nouns, they have the suffix a. But then you have to think about Indo-European languages and their gender of nouns. So is actually gender in European languages, except for English. English is a black sheep there. Is gender actually biological? Is muškarčina in Serbian actually feminine? It is, right? And devojčurak is actually masculine. So the gender was grammatical originally, and in Serbian it is still grammatical. In English it's biological, but that's very rare. In Indo-European languages, generally, you know, grammatical gender. So that means that maybe in languages where it became feminine because these languages tried to, you know, match the real gender of the noun with the grammatical gender of the noun. And then that means that it was probably, you look at, you know, the suffixes that are masculine. These are non-A suffixes like Latin and Greek, and they are the oldest ones, right? Except for Sanskrit, they have s there. So we think that probably then it was actually non-feminine, and that it was something like snusos or snusas. And then this is actually the root, snusos. Now, what I just did for you, and we did it actually together, is called comparative reconstruction. This is how these Proto-Indo-European dictionaries are made. And let me just try to share my screen for a moment, but a different screen. I will try to share my how do I have to stop presenting, sorry, and I have to present Chrome tab. So let me share my new tab here. So here I can say Proto-Indo-European root sister-in-law. And let's say, oh, maybe it's there. Aha, and you see, it's nusos, the way we reconstructed it. So you have these big dictionaries. I can scroll on and on and on, and this is actually not the complete dictionary. This is only what Wikipedia has, but you can download PDF. So this is, you know, there's nothing more to be done here. But what, for example, if you are interested in historical linguistics combined with natural language processing, statistics, computation, etc., there are people who are now, you know, feeding computers with this Proto-Indo-European roots, and then roots of these same nouns in different languages from different periods of time. And then they are trying to get data from computers, artificial intelligence, machine learning. What are the patterns, how languages develop? Are there common rules? So nowadays, this is even becoming, you know, a new hot topic, because we think that big data, machine learning, artificial intelligence, when you train it on these data sets, can give us new insights into why languages develop the way they develop. But for you right now, what is really important is that you should simply know the main groups of Indo-European families of languages. And this is the part where I will again stop presenting my screen, the tab, and I will start presenting my presentation again. So do you see my, yeah, you should see my presentation again. You should simply know these things. Oh no, sorry, wrong slide. You should know these things. So you actually learned this by heart and probably forgot most of it for the first year exam with Professor Novakov. So these are Proto-Indo-European languages of the Centum group. These are, let's say, Western European languages mostly. And then these are, you know, the main groups are Italic, or you can call it Romance as well. Then there's the dead group of the isolate Hittite language, that's called the Anatolian branch. Then our beloved Germanic branch with dead Gothic as the East Germanic languages, but very alive and kicking West Germanic languages, which include English, and North Germanic, which are alive and kicking but are not globally dominant. These are descendants fundamentally of the Viking Old Norse language. These are Norwegian, Icelandic, Faroese, and partially not directly related to Vikings, but Danish and Swedish. And then you have, again, the dead Tolkarian language, but partially living, barely surviving Celtic languages such as Breton. Welsh is okay, doing very well, but Manx, for example, is dead. And the Hellenic group, which is actually just one language, that's modern Greek, descendant of the ancient Greek, which is also an isolate. And then you have to know the same for the Centum group. The Centum group is usually considered the Eastern group. This is the mother tongue of most of us, the Slavic language from the South Slavic group, Serbo-Croatian, or Serbo-Croatian, Bosnian, Montenegrin, whatever you want to call it. I think the only right word is naški, because then you don't offend anybody. And of course, the Indo-Iranian branch with its branches of Dardic, Indic, and Iranian, plus Baltic and Albanian. Albanian and is an isolate, just like Armenian is an isolate. So just learn this table. It's somewhere in the back of your mind. But for your general language knowledge and your general linguistic knowledge, be aware of the amount of work that actually went into this. So we are literally standing on shoulders of giants. So people like Jacob Grimm, August Schleicher, William Jones, even Ferdinand de Saussure. Ferdinand de Saussure was actually into historical linguistics, and he had a very cool theory that people called stupid, but was later proved correct. But Ferdinand de Saussure was very interested in historical linguistics. So many famous linguists were into historical linguistics, and this, what we now memorize, was cutting-edge research based on thousands and thousands of work hours spent comparing data from multiple languages. But for your exam, you get one simple question. Identify the branch and group, if applicable, of the following Indo-European languages. And you get 5 languages. This whole question is worth 10 points. So each of these bulleted items, for each letter, you get 2 points. So I just mentioned Manx. Unfortunately, it's a dead language. Nobody speaks it anymore. The last speaker died a long, long time ago on the island of Man. So this is a Celtic language from the Goidelic subgroup. What about Gothic? Another dead language. We know it's Germanic, and it's the only example of East Germanic languages, and unfortunately, as I mentioned, dead. Galician, you can call it Italic, or you can call it Romance. Maybe it's better to call it Romance. There are many tables. You don't have to use the table which I gave in the presentation. I am aware of all the different terms. So you can say it's Italic branch or Romance branch, and then it's either Western Romanic or Western Italic, and then it's Western Ibero-Romance. You can also call it that. What about Dutch? Well, Dutch, you see that we have 2 Germanic languages here. After all, we are learning English linguistics, so we should focus on Germanic languages. Dutch is Germanic, but it's not East Germanic. It's actually West Germanic, and it's Low Germanic. Finally, we cannot completely neglect that this is an Indo-European family of languages. So although we live in Europe, this is just 1/2 of the family. So we mentioned, for example, you get at least one question about the Iranian sub-branch of the family. So Hindi is Indo-Aryan or Indo-Iranian, and within this, it's the Indic or Indian group, let's say. And that's it. So you have to memorize it, but you don't have to memorize it from scratch. You actually have this in your script from the first year from Professor Novakov. You can use the slides which are in this presentation, which will be uploaded. You can use different terminology, just be consistent with the source that you are using. I'm familiar with all of them, probably most of them. So easy points. Nobody scores fewer than 8 points in this exercise. So there's no reason why your generation should be any different. It's just like 1 hour of learning, especially because you already know this. It's just about, refreshing your memory. And that brings us to the second question that we can address today, and that's sound shifts. But before I move to that, maybe it's a good moment to ask questions, feedback, comments, criticism, of course. Also, I would like to improve something that I can improve. Given the circumstances, there's probably a lot to improve, but apart from teleportation, it's very difficult to actually think of something that could improve, you know, like the learning experience. But nothing. Okay, then let's move on. So, so now you know about the second question. So this will give you additional 10 points. So with the first question, you already are, let's say, aware of how you can score 20 out of 100 points. The next 10 points come from early sound shifts, or let's say systematic changes, or in that separated one branch of Indo-European languages from the common Indo-European tree of languages. So here we forget about, you know, Indo-Iranian Indo-Iranian branch of languages, and we really focus on Germanic languages. So do you know, and do you believe me, that I can bet you 1,000 euros? I don't want to bet you, but I could bet you 1,000 euros that you actually heard Proto Germanic language probably 2 or 3 times in your life. Do you believe me? It's a dead language.
Yeah, we heard.
You heard it, and I will show you why. Do you know this guy?
Yes.
He's older now, not so not so, muscled up as he was here. So I have a link here, and I will now share my screen, and hopefully this time you will be able to hear it, because I examined Google Meet, and it turns out the only way that we can hear audio from video files is if I share a tab in Google Chrome. Then I can decide, then I can actually allow you to hear the audio. So let's test this capability. So I will share a Chrome tab with the gladiator opening scene. And I clicked on share audio. So you probably know this award-winning music by Hans Zimmer. And you know the opening scene, so it's actually, he's in Germania. They are about to fight the decisive battle against Germanic tribes. And by the way, there's a movie, there's a German Netflix series about this. It's called Barbarians, a new series released a couple of days ago. So let's go to see, it says Germania. And so now they're waiting for the answer. Will there be peace or there will be no peace? And then they see, as you probably know, they say no. They say no, right? There's a big-headed negotiator, and soon you will hear something. So, according to unverified sources, the screenplay writers and the director of the movie asked a professor of historical linguistics to actually provide them with this sentence. What did you hear?
Something really similar to kind of French.
Aha, okay, maybe the sound, but you did hear the sound. That's amazing. That's great news. So let me stop my YouTube sharing, and let me go back to the presentation. So I will be presenting my second screen, and you should see again the still from the movie. So what, yeah, sounded like French, but that's because the guy was screaming and so on. What actually is uttered there is this. Ihr sicht verflüchte Hunde. Does it still sound like French? Okay, there are these mutated vowels, like instead of Hund, which is the modern day hound in English, it's Hund. So ihr sicht verflüchte Hunde. And this, yeah,
More a combination of German and French.
Yes. So, but the key point there is German. Yes, this sounds quite German. And if you look, if you try to find the same sentence in other Germanic languages, in Icelandic it sounds like something along these lines. Du ert fjandin hundar. In Danish, I don't know I mean, I'm just guessing the pronunciation, but du er skidde hunde. In Dutch, it's again my pronunciation, but je bent verdomd. It sounds terrible, like Serbian F word, but je bent verdomd honden. Norwegian, something like du er jævla hunder. Swedish, very similar, different spelling, but pronunciation is probably quite the same. Du er jævla hunder. German, sie sind verdammt Hunden. And only if you think about it, this all sounds pretty much the same. Do you agree? This is very similar. It's only English that's different. You are damn dogs. You are cursed dogs. That's what it actually means. You are goddamned dogs. It was for some reason very offensive to be a dog at the turn of the centuries, at the turn of millennia, back then in the Roman Empire. So this, we think, is, let's say, a modern idea of what Proto-Germanic sounded like. But the question is then how these languages developed in such a way. English is an exception. English had another layer of development. But if you forget about English, all other Germanic languages are very similar, but again, very different from other Indo-European languages, especially in terms of their phonology. And you can actually trace this development by just 2 or 3 changes, sound changes. These are the shifts. But to illustrate this further and why English is the black sheep, let me just show you the Lord's Prayer in Old English, Middle English, and Modern English. As you will see, Old English was actually very similar to Icelandic, Norwegian, all these languages that you saw there. So this is the Lord's Prayer in Old English. Feder ure dude arton helvenum, siedin nama je halvo, tu bekume din riče, je wurde din vila on eordan sva on helvenum. Urne je dehvam we can have sile ustode and forgive us ure jilta sva vai forgive us urum jiltendum and ne ledet du us on kostnunge at alisus of evil. Evil is, of course, evil. Sodliče. Then in Middle, so do you is this English? Would you ever consider this English?
Probably not.
No, but that actually is real Germanic English. So that's why history of English is so interesting, and you can take the Tanya's course in the next semester, because you will see what happened to English is unique in history of all languages. No other language changed as much as English changed. And then in Middle English, it sounds more like modern English, but still very weird. But that's actually a deviation in Germanic languages. Other Germanic languages didn't change like that. Ure fadir du that art in heavenus, halvet bedi name, the kingdom cum tu bedi ville dawn in erde as in heavene. Ivetus die ure bread over other substance, and for evos ure detis as we for even to ure deturis. So it was heavily influenced by French. This is, of course, Middle English is the period when most of the lexical stock was taken into English. This is the period that made English vocabulary the richest vocabulary of all languages in the world. And that happened because of the layering of different sounds. So you have, you know, not sounds, sorry, different lexes. So you have Old English roots, you have French and Latin and Greek roots, and nowhere else do you have this difference in, you know, possible expressions of meanings. And modern English, of course, is a complete deviation from the Germanic pattern. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be thy name, your kingdom come, etc. You know this from Metallica. So how did this happen? That's a good question. How do not, oh my God, my slides are skipping to the back. So how did this happen? No, again. How did this happen? It happened like this. So we had this Proto-Indo-European language that was spoken by the Kurgans. They started migrating to the east and to the west, which gave rise to Satem languages, which are, for example, Slavic languages in the east mostly, and Centum languages in the west. And this was the first shift, the first big shift. And then these Satem languages developed into all languages that belong to the Indo-Iranian branch, plus Slavic and also Albanian and Armenian, and a couple of dead languages. Centum languages gave birth to other Centum languages, but also Germanic. The question is, why did we have this, this shift? Why did Germanic deviate as a Proto-Germanic language from the rest of the Centum group? And the explanation is the first consonant shift. So the whole history of modern English in terms of phonology in comparison to Proto-Indo-European is just 3 big shifts. So from Proto-Indo-European, you had the centum-satem shift. That's the difference between, in Serbian, we say sto for 100. In Latin, we say centum. That's the centum-satem shift. It's the same root in Proto-Indo-European. But in Satem languages, k developed into s. So we say satem. Instead of, we say sto instead of kto. And in Centum languages, this remained k. So after this centum-satem shift, all Germanic languages underwent the first consonant shift. This is actually the change which I showed you. Every pater became father. And this applied to Proto-Germanic languages, and then all other Germanic languages had the same feature. And then what made modern English English is just another sound change, and that's the great vowel shift. And that's it. There's nothing else. When you think about big changes, this is what made English phonologically different from Proto-Indo-European. And this is actually what you get to do in the third question in the written exam. You get 5 or 6 words from different Indo-European languages, and you have to explain then how how words from Centum languages changed in Germanic languages using the first consonant shift and the great vowel shift. And if you speak German, what made German different from other Germanic languages today is something called second consonant shift. So it's a change which only happened in German, just like the great vowel shift only happened in English. But if you take it back, if you somehow can rewind these changes, and if you can apply in your mind these changes in reverse, you could theoretically understand, at least in writing, these earlier versions of German and English by just you know, trying to do the changes in reverse. So let me explain the centum-satem shift. Centum-satem shift is very basic. We won't go into details because in the written exam and in this whole course, what we want to know from you, what I would like you to remember, is that this was the first shift of the Proto-Indo-European family of languages. This is the shift which is responsible for having these two large groups of languages in the Indo-European family of languages. And the main change here is actually what you have in the top of the slides. So you have these palatovelar sounds that are spelled here with k, g, and gh, with this little apostrophe. I cannot pronounce them because I'm terrible at pronouncing these ancient sounds. So k and g and gh palatovelars changed into sibilants in Satem languages, but they actually just slightly changed in Centum languages. Instead of palatovelars, they became velars. So this is what you actually have here. So Proto-Indo-European, I don't know if my laser pointer is working, but these ones, so Proto-Indo-European k, g, gh. You see, in Centum languages like Tocharian, Hittite, Greek, Latin, Old Irish, I think, Gothic, you see that k, g, gh fundamentally just lost this palatal component and became velars. K, g, h in Latin, or sometimes g, depends. There were some changes in Latin as well. But in, for example, Sanskrit and Old Slavonic, Old Church Slavonic, k became s, g became y, or in Old Slavonic z, and gh became h or z in Old Slavonic. That's it. This is the difference between, for example, old, let's say, not old, Latin granum and zrno in Slavic languages. So granum is Latin, you see, g, granum, Latin, h, and in Slavonic, z, zrno. K, centum, so 100 in Latin, Old Slavonic, s, sto. Nobody knows why this happened. So this is a big topic for exploration. I'd mentioned that computational linguists try to use artificial intelligence and big data sets to figure out why this could have happened, but nobody has a good explanation. So this is just a change, and this gave birth to Centum and Satem languages. Roughly, we are talking about languages in the East and languages in the West. So that's centum-satem. There are additional examples in these slides. So for you, it's only important that when we will do the sample question on this in the slide. Sorry, next week. So I will show you. When you get those 5 words, you just have to say Centum languages are these, Satem languages are these, and then you focus on what is really important, and that's the first. No. My animations are completely messed up. Then you focus on what's really important, and that's the first consonant shift. So this first consonant shift is what created Germanic languages. The first consonant shift is actually better known as Grimm's law, because of Jacob Grimm, who was the first person who actually noticed that this was a regular change. So he was the one who noticed that in Proto-Indo-European languages, things were different from Germanic languages, and that these phonological differences were systemic changes that happened in 3 phases. So this change actually affected voiced and voiced aspirated stops. Stops are actually sounds that you produce. These are sounds like bh, dh, and gh. So these are like plosives that are aspirated. So there's a burst of breath that accompanies the closure of plosives or stops. These are interchangeable terms. So in literature, you will see this as a letter with a small aspirated sound h in the superscript. So they were Proto-Indo-European labial, dental, and velar voiced aspirated stops. So something like bh, dh, gh. And Grimm actually figured out how these stops trigger the change and how the change progressed. So he noticed that there were three phases. So the first phase was all these aspirated stops that you see here. So here. So Proto-Indo-European bher, bhrater, bhe, bhragas, ghostis, dlang. In non-Germanic languages, they had their separate development, but they fundamentally either lost aspiration or changed completely. Like in Latin, this gh actually became h. What happened in Germanic languages was that they lost aspiration. So every bh became b, every dh became d, every gh became g. And you can see that Barian, Brodar, Dethis, Dagas, that's actually day today, Gastas, and Lags. This is now long. You may say, okay, no big deal. Why is this such a big deal? But do you think that Proto-Germanic languages didn't have b, d, and g? So out of bh, dh, and gh, you get b, d, and g, right? But your language already contains b, d, and g, right? And now you have suddenly two different b, d, and g sets. The original b, d, and g set and the new one that was created by losing the aspiration of bh, dh, and gh. So can you guess what happened? So, you know, bh, dh, and gh, they say, okay, we are the new b, d, and g. The old b, d, and g, you do whatever you want. I don't care, but this is now our place in the phonological system. And this is exactly what we think could have happened, but we are not sure entirely about the stages. So then b, d, and g had to move. But it was not only b, d, and g, it's also fricatives who were affected. So people do not consistently agree on the stages. Sorry, that's the wrong slide again. I mentioned that my animations are messed up. Those protein, so b, d, and g. This is actually the summary of the sound changes. So you see this b, d, and g, which were invaded by new b, d, and g. They had to change to p, t, and k, and p, t, and k then changed to f, th, and h. And this is actually the first consonant shift. Grimm thinks, he's dead, he thought, and most people agree that this was actually a different stage, that first b, bh, dh, and gh change into b, d, and g, then p, t, k change into f, th, and h, and b, d, g change into p, t, and k. But many linguists these days think that maybe the order, despite some evidence from Jacob Grimm that historical documents show that this was the order, that logically it makes more sense that b, d, and g change second. But needless to say, these are the names of these changes. So first consonant shift was loss of aspiration, bh became b, devoicing, b became p, and fricativization, p became f. So I didn't show you these other stages. So this is fricativization. So every p, t, and k, these were voiceless plosives, p, t, and k, they became fricatives. F, th, h. And this is why we say father, not pater or pader. This is why we say three, not three. This is why we say, you know, 100, not hundred, because originally this was k in centum. And the last stage was, as I mentioned, according to Grimm, but more likely it was maybe the second stage, was b, d, and g. These voice stops becoming voiceless. P, b becomes p. So ball becomes pool, decma or deca becomes 10, and this gonu becomes ni, although it was originally k, kni, and it is still spelled in English with k. So this is actually the first consonant shift. That's it. I just showed you. B, d, and g were the first, let's say, stage. Laws of aspiration. F, th, and h were produced as fricatives in the second stage, and then p, t, and k were the result of devoicing. So if you want to show it, you know, graphically, I have it here, but in the slides you also have a neat summary here. So loss of aspiration, fricativization, and devoicing. And if you manage to, you know, get handouts from the nice people at the American corner, or you've printed the handouts yourselves, there's the first exercise there. This is the first consonant shift, and this is exactly what you can get and what you will get in the third question of the final exam. So you will be asked to identify the sound change. But of course, not like this. You will get separate words, but these words will be from this set. So Sanskrit had bhan, right? So this was aspirated. So what do you think that, so you have it in the handouts, or maybe I can try to write it here, although my pen tablet is kind of malfunctioning, but let me try, just a second. So pen. Okay, so I can help you and write something like, no, it doesn't work, sorry. I cannot write. This will ruin our practice classes. Okay, then. I will try to come up just with answers. I will try to write. If it doesn't work for next class, you will have the key to this, but I may have to change the laptop for the presentation. My pen is not working properly. So what do you think was this? So this in English is?
Ban.
What? Yes, it's ban. What do you think? So in Sanskrit, you have aspirated dh. It became in English
Do.
you. Yes. So you see, for for example, in the written exam, you will have the question: explain how the following words are related, and you get Sanskrit dhav and English do, and then you underline dh and the, and you say, you write next to it ICS.
To the last aspiration.
That's the first consonant shift. And then you write next to it loss of aspiration. That's the first stage, right? Loss of aspiration. Sorry. I will try to come up with a better pen tablet for the next class. Then what do you think was blossom in Latin. So this, of course, is not a lot probably. Okay, so for this you have to know a little bit of Latin sound changes. If you look at the previous slide, so can you really get b out of anything that is not aspirated? So English blossom should be bh in the Proto-Indo-European. But in Latin, it was unfortunately not bh. In Latin, this was actually floss. The reason why it's floss is that actually these aspirated sounds like bh in Latin had their own development. So this is again loss of aspiration. So the first one is loss of aspiration in this one, but you will not get this one in the written exam because this is not clear. You have to know Latin sound changes to understand why this is actually loss of aspiration, because it doesn't look like loss of aspiration. But here in the next one, this is actually spot on. So English, this is clue. So look here. What was it if this was clue in in English? It has to be g in Indo-European earlier languages, and this is exactly the case. So in Latin, this is globus, right? So g. Oh my God, this is it's terrible. When I tested it, it worked, and then this happens. I'm really disappointed. So globus. Can you guess what Sanskrit vaha produced in Old English? So you are looking at Sanskrit, and this h in Sanskrit vaha was related to the aspirated sound gh. So can you guess what it was in Old English?
G?
Yes, it was vague. If you speak German, you know that to this very day, it is actually g. So g is again loss of aspiration. But this one, for example, in the written exam, you would write that this is ICS. I is actually not I. This is actually one, Roman one. So first consonant shift. And then what would you call it? You see here, it's mentioned, it's devoicing. So here you would write ICS, devoicing. Ah, my God. I don't know what's happening. Maybe because I'm streaming and my computer is dying because of streaming and encoding, but the pen is not working. What do you think pluvia, p, produced in English?
Flow.
Yes, flow. This is actually the modern flow. And this, if you go back again one slide, you see that this is actually the prime example of fricativization. So this, here you would write first consonant shift. Sorry. And you would write frica. Sorry. Can you guess what th produced in English?
The.
Yes. This is daughter. And here you can see this. So since the could only be produced from the loss of aspiration. And you see that in Greek, there was aspiration. So you will call this again first consonant shift. loss of aspiration. Can you guess what canere, Latin canere, gave us in English? So you are looking for k, right? And then it produced h. Believe it or not, English hen is related to canere. So this is first consonant shift, but in this case, it's not loss of aspiration. This is the second stage. This is fricativization. So I can write just fricativization. What do we have in English that's related to Latin trans? True, yes. Just a second, I have people wanting to join, so I admitted somebody. Yes, so this is through. So this is through. This is through. And again, if you think about it, this th was product of, it could only have been product of t, so this is again fricativization. So you see, this is actually the pattern. After several examples, it becomes really, straightforward and clear. You have to just memorize those three pairs of three consonants that change. So when you see t in English, what was it in Indo-European and Proto-Indo-European and all other languages? It was d, right? You see, it was devoicing. So do you know that this word dicere is, actually teach? Now you know. And it's actually just devoicing. So it's all first consonant shift, but this is devoicing. Okay, you get the idea. So what about Sanskrit? What could be the word which is the present day English preposition to? It's the same one, right? It's the same in Serbian, right? Do. You see? Do and to are actually the same. It's a single change. This is what I told you. The phonological difference between modern English and Proto-Indo-European, and in a way Slavic, is just a couple of shifts. In terms of English, it's this first consonant shift and then the great vowel shift. There's nothing else. Only two changes. And then in Slavic, we had some other changes of our own, but it's always 2 or 3 changes, nothing else. But the phonology changes considerably because with shifts, the whole language system, the whole phonology is affected. Kela, Kelia, if you are religious, otišo monahu Keliju na Atosu, what could be k in English? We go back here. So k gives you h. Believe it or not, Kelia is a direct descendant of English whole. And again, you see k and h, that's fricativization. So frick, I will just write frick. Not a freak, frick. Labium, sorry. Lip. So b gives you p, that's not fricativization, that's devoicing. So these are all common Indo-European words. Can you guess what this word is in Serbian? Because, these are common Indo-European words. We should have labium and lip. Is usna related to this? It's not. There's no sound change which could turn labium into usna. But when you are really angry, začepi. Is there something that begins in l? Začepi. Labiu. Do you know labrnja?
Yes.
Yes, yes, yes.
Labium and labrnja are actually the same words. Labium, lip, and labrnja are sisters, brothers, whatever you want to call them. And there in labrnja you see the common Indo-European consonants, l and b. So labrnja and lip are the same. So domus is in Latin house. So what can the give you? That's devoicing, but then g, the third stage, turn into pt and k. So this should give you timber.
Timber.
Yeah. If you think about it, when you think about, Vikings, early Anglo-Saxons, what were houses made of?
Wood.
Wood. That's it, you see? Sometimes you have sound changes in meaning. My pen really doesn't want to write t here. Unbelievable. This works, but this doesn't work. I can't believe it. Okay, so I will write. It deletes everything. Okay, I'll stop trying. So I will say d and t. Maybe, like this. No. How about this? Ah. No. No.
Don't worry about it.
Okay, I'll write t here. So this, of course, is d into t, devoicing. So you always just memorize these three changes. So this is devoicing. And gelu, b, d, and g give you p, t, k. Yes, this is frost is actually cool. That's devoicing. Now, you know that the first consonant shift could produce b, d, and g only out of aspirated sounds. So bh, dh, and gh. But in Latin, there were no bh, dh, and gh because Latin got rid of them through its own sound changes. So Latin is not always illustrative here. But based on the example with floss and blossom, you know that this is actually also f. So originally in Latin, this was f. But if you had to identify it, this would be actually loss of aspiration. So this is loss of aspiration. The problem is only in Latin, because originally this f in Latin was bh in Proto-Indo-European. Now, what would be the Latin correspondent of tag? Ducere. Do you know who Duce was?
No.
Duce was Mussolini. Yes, Duce was, yeah, Duce, Mussolini, that's Italian for Führer, the leader. So Duce, it comes from this Latin ducere or ducere, I don't know how to pronounce it, but in English it's a tag. So you see, in English it followed a different development. Then this is my favorite. So in Greek you have graphein, to write. So b, d, and g should give you p, t, and k. What is graphein, to write in English? Carve. So this, of course, is devoicing. I will write it again. I'm not writing it all the time. You write yourselves, right? Devoicing. But how do you explain the semantic difference? Why is it, carve? You're writing, but suddenly you're carving.
Because they probably used like wood or something else they could actually carve.
Exactly. So if you watch How to Train Your Dragons, you know, Vikings, they don't write, they carve runes into the wood, right? Runic script was always carved into the bark of the tree or into, you know, piece of the wood. So that's why carve is actually direct correspondent of write, because actually carving was writing for early Germanic tribes because of the runic script, which was, you know, these direct lines, no bends, nothing. It was made for carving. The runic script was really made to be carved into wood. And this is another example of course, fricativization. Pt and k become ft and h. So English
Food.
food, yes. Can you imagine? So that actually bread and food are the same. They are fundamentally, bread was the food of the poor. Pharaoh in Greek was, of course,
Here.
in English, fear. So again, in Greek, it sounds like it's p sounds like it's some kind of an aspirated sound, but no, you look actually at p. So this is again the same example of fricativization. P and k become f and h. Now, Tolkien was actually professor of historical linguistics, the author of Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings. And can you guess what Latin mortis is in
Mordor.
Old English? Mordor, of course. Mordor. Now, this the, of course, could only become the product of loss of aspiration. And you know that Latin is a bad example for this, but this is loss of aspiration. So this t in Latin was originally an aspirated sound in Proto-Indo-European. But this is actually how Mordor came to be. So Mordor is not really a new word that Tolkien created. It's simply death in Old English. But that's why it sounds so powerful when you read it in English, in the original, because these words sound made up, but still they sound very Anglo-Saxon, because they are. Tolkien relied heavily on his knowledge of historical linguistics. What could be the Sanskrit bu?
Be.
Yes, this is the verb to be, and this is loss of aspiration, because Sanskrit had aspirated sounds. Can you guess what ved is in Latin? Again, you have to, you know, this is not a, you know, good example. Latin didn't have aspirated sounds, but this was vatis in Latin, and it's ved in English, and this the was product of the loss of aspiration. But this one is not loss of aspiration. So tongere, to know, in English is, can you guess? So t should give us in a fricative th, right? And
Think.
yes. G should give us k. So you have a fricativization t into th and devoicing g into k. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is actually English think. So in Latin, you know, in English, you think. Just slightly different. Pterodactyl comes from pter, Greek root and prefix pter. So p into f, fricativization. So this is a feather. You see how related all these languages are. Trudere, to push. So t is fricativized into th. So this becomes th. And the becomes devoiced into th, and you get trudere, to push, threat. You know how bar fight starts, you know, guys start pushing each other, and that's a threat. That's how it developed in English. What could be ache in Greek? So what? So you have k, but here you have g, exactly. So if you go back to this slide, g was devoiced into k, so this is devoicing. So, oh, sorry, I wrote it in the wrong place. So this is agonia, and it's ache. So f is not a product of g. I apologize. I will erase this if my pen allows me to do it. So what could produce f?
P.
P, yes. Here it really is p, but not, oh, I shouldn't have switched to the eraser. Now it doesn't allow me to switch back to the pen. So this is puter. I'm not sure, but that's what's in the key. Hlud. Hlud today is not pronounced as hlud. We lost h, so it's loud. But h was a product of k. So this was hluere. So k into h, as you can see here, k into h is fricativization, and this k into h, hluere into hlud, is fricativization. That gave us loud today. And chemas, so sorry, so chemas is fricativization, pt and k become ft and h, so this chemas is home. I just lost my pen, and that's fricativization. And this way, these words will appear in that first question. So I am 4 minutes over time, but let me just introduce you to a very brief exception. So this was for Nobel Prize. So what Jacob Grimm discovered here, this describes all Germanic languages, how they are pronounced these days. So it's a big deal. And, you know, they wanted to erect monuments to Jacob Grimm, and they did erect monuments. So Jacob Grimm is both famous as a linguist and a collector of fairy tales. But then came Verner. Verner law is a law that explains exceptions. So Verner noticed that despite a huge effort by Jacob Grimm to systematize the Grimm's law, there were 4 exceptions. So, and these are the exceptions. And that this is known as Verner's law because he discovered it. So Grimm's law says that p, t, and k should change into f, t, and h. That's fricativization. But when p, t, and k are in the intervocalic position, this is this here. So this means between vowels, intervocalic. So intervocalic position. Intervocalic. This means between vowels, right? Intervocalic, between vowels. So when p, t, and k are between vowels, sorry, then p, t, and k do not change into f, t, and h. They change into b, d, and g. So, and on top of that, Verner discovered that in this position, when there's a consonant between vowels, s is also affected, and s changes into r. So these are the exceptions. So p, t, and k, and s as well. So not only Grimm's 3 consonants, but 4. S is a new one. P, t, k, and s in the intervocalic position do not change into f, t, h, and Grimm didn't even talk about s. Verner noticed that p, t, k, s change into b, d, g, and r. And here, this is the second set on your handout. You have examples of the Grimm's of Verner's law. So Verner's law, I can try to write it here. So P, T, K, and S in the intervocalic position change into B, D. Sorry, this is B. No, B. Okay, B, D, G, and R. So this worden in English, in Sanskrit, it was actually vrtana. Caput in Latin, in Gothic, was actually haubith. Plotos in English is actually flood. Now, when you look at English flood, you can ask me, yes, Kavgic, this is interesting, but how come that, this is the, but it's not in the intervocalic position? In English, it's not in the intervocalic position because modern English lost a bunch of suffixes. But in Old English and the Proto Germanic period, it was in the intervocalic position because there were suffixes. So you can see it in Greek. You see this plotos, t, is actually in the intervocalic position. And that's why you have the present day flood. Because theoretically, without the Verner's law, we would pronounce flood today as fluff. It would be th, but it's not th, we know, it's actually flood. And then the word which we actually discuss, this is snoru. This is about s in the intervocalic position. Sveger, can you guess what that is in Serbian? Svekrva, right? So that we lost that word in English, obviously, but in Greek it is the Greek it's hekura. So k gives us g in the intervocalic position. So this kaza in Sanskrit is not kaza in Spanish. It's s produces r in the intervocalic position. So this is zeka, actually. Hair, veliki zeka. And this is the most famous example of Verner's law. So pater, t is in the intervocalic position. According to Grimm, this should become th. So we should pronounce this as father. But we don't pronounce it as father, we pronounce it as father. So this is actually in modern English, it's not the, it's in Old English it was spelled like this, but it's the. If you look here, you can see that this was an intermediate step between t and the. So today we say father, and it's still not the, but that's only one step from the, you see, from the, which is a voiced fricative, to the is a single step. So sometimes the change didn't go all way. Sometimes it stopped in this intermediate step. And this is the example of father. So this is a mistake in Latin. So it's not atius, it's altius. So there should be l here. But the final word is definitely s. So altius gave you elder. And again, Latin had in old Proto, let's say Indo-European, there were other suffixes there. So this was in the intervocalic position, but s did not always have to be in the intervocalic position according to some couple of examples. Decas gave us tigus, but that's Gothic and it died. Sanskrit kunktari gave us hang, and this is a wonderful example. Antar is the present day under. And that's it. That's Verner's law. So we are running out of time, and we are probably tired because we didn't make a break. I apologize. So there's only something called High German consonant shift, but we can do it next week. let me then just show you the example of the, let's say, the third question that you can get in the written exam. This is, for example, this Latin granum, Greek geron, Serbo-Croatian zrno, Lithuanian žirnas, German corn, English corn. So how would you solve this? I cannot write this because I didn't leave enough room here for my non-working pen. With the working pen I could write, but with the pen with the current behavior of my pen, I cannot write anything. But the way to solve this is to say, so how you see, you have to explain the differences in the following in the Indo-European cognates. Then you would say Serbo-Croatian and Lithuanian are Satem languages, whereas Latin, Greek, German, and English are Centum languages. And this way you already described what happened with Serbian Z and Ž, and Ž in Lithuanian. Then you have to describe what happened between, let's say, Latin granum and English corn. And now you know it. So you write Latin granum, and then you put an arrow into the direction of English corn, and you say, and then you write G, and then add an arrow, K, so G changes into K, and you write first consonant shift, but the G changes into PT and K, so this is first consonant shift, fricativization. And that's it. You just scored 3.3 points. So usually, actually, in this task, there are 4 tasks, because then I can give you 2.5, 2.5, 2.5, 2.5 for a total of 10. For B, you write all languages are Centum languages, and then you just describe the difference between dentis and, for example, tunthus. So D into T, B D G into P T K. That's again first consonant shift. That's fricativization. Yeah, but the G into P T. No, that's devoicing. That's devoicing. Sorry, I'm tired now. I also had classes in the morning at the faculty. And then T into Th. That's actually fricative. I was looking at T into Th. T into Th, that's fricativization. There's one change which we didn't describe. This is actually the change in German, why you have th instead of T. That's the second consonant shift, but we will do it next week. And for Greek, plotos, flood, and flute, you again write all these languages are Centum languages. And then you say P into F, so PTK into FTK, first consonant shift fricativization, T into D, and that's what we just discovered is called Verner's law. T into D, Verner's law. And then there's another change in German, modern German. So again, instead of D, you have T. So instead of flood, you have flute. This T in German is the second consonant shift, but it's a very simple change. We will mention it actually next week. This is so whenever you see German, it's actually there's something with the second consonant shift. So this is the shift which had the power that had the great vowel shift in English. So the second consonant shift only happened in modern German, and it changed modern German from other Germanic languages, so its pronunciation is different. But if you go back, then if you reverse the second consonant shift, German then sounded, before it, it sounded like Proto Germanic in a way. So that's it. Once we also practice a couple more examples of the second consonant shift next week, you will be absolutely ready to do 3 exercises for 30%. Questions, comments, criticism? I am over time. I know. I apologize. I didn't look at the watch, but at least we practiced, right? We did the first page of the handout. So tell me, or maybe you would just like to go and
I'm
grab.
sorry.
Yeah.
I thought we had practice classes until 8:15.
Uh-huh. So would you like to do it for 15 more minutes?
No, no, I'm confused as to why we're over the time. I mean,
Because we didn't make a break. Because I promised
okay,
that we
okay.
would make a break. I'm talking for 2 hours. Believe me, it's not that easy. But okay, I can actually show you then, since we are
Uh,
here.
maybe
I uh-huh.
just one question during the first phase when the sounds actually lost the aspiration. Did they just like merged into one sound? I mean, did the original B say the B?
You mean
Yeah.
like here? Let me go back. So that's actually open for discussion, and without a time machine, we don't know. We think that it's loss of aspiration. So we don't think that bh, that this
Mhm.
aspirated h merged with b. We think that simply bh aspirated bh became non-aspirated. But
Mhm.
again, without the time machine and going back, many things will forever be unknown. It makes sense also what you say, but most linguists think that it's more likely that it was simply a loss of something than a merge, because merge would be a more complicated process, and languages are in a way lazy, so they just lose something.
Yeah, I meant like more phonetically speaking, did they have another way to write the actual sound, or it was just the same B?
This again, is a huge leap of faith that we are doing here. So Gothic only exists in a couple of copies of Gospels that were translated into Gothic. And Gothic is the oldest example of Germanic languages, but it's actually 700 years older than the Proto Germanic. So, this, when you look at Gothic, you can only assume some things, but you
Mhm.
can never be sure. First of all, you don't know exactly how it was pronounced. You can guess some things because sometimes there's a rhyme somewhere. But
Mhm.
generally, this is a lot of this is actually very educated speculation. I have to admit it. Because when you look at Gothic, it's like, you ask your grandmother, Granny, what was it like at the time of, Miloš Obrenović? She was
Yeah, yeah,
not alive then. She doesn't know. She can only tell you what her great grandmother told
yeah,
her
yeah,
if she was alive. And that's what Gothic is. So Gothic shows you the oldest form of Germanic languages, but that form is already 600 years.
yeah, yeah, got it.
So, we don't know. I could pretend to know everything, but I have to be honest. So a
No, of
lot
course,
of
that's
this
why we're
is,
talking about history.
yeah. I mean, that this is very often the problem. Nowadays, everything's easy. You have data sets for the last 20 years. Everything is in Google. You can track sound changes, lexical changes, vocabulary changes. You can see on a daily basis how people change their preferences for one form or another, in which parts of the country, etc. Everything you see here is based on, sometimes just 200 pages of text.
Mhm.
And that's all you have
Yeah,
for an entire language. So, take it with a
interesting.
grain of salt.
Yeah, yeah, interesting.
Okay. But thank you for this question. It's a very good question. And, you directed it at the, let's say the core of what is presented here. This is our best guess. Let's put it that
Thank
way.
you.
Because, for everything that you see here, there's very little written evidence that remains to this day. Everything that we know about Old English is based on, Beowulf and a couple of poems, and that's it.
You might find something carved somewhere.
Yes, but tombstones, engravings in wooden, poles somewhere in the Anglo-Saxon kingdom, but that's it. Compared to what you consider these days to be the minimum amount of corpus to do some research, what we have for these languages is nothing, really. They say you should have like 100 million words in a corpus to be really able to analyze the syntax. But everything that you have for all English and for Gothic even, way less than that, this is under 10 million words, even fewer than that. So it's simply, you have to assume many things. Even the way I pronounced Old Father's Lord's Prayer, this is our best guess based on the poems and the analysis of how rhymes work, and some other indirect evidence of how people talked about the weird dialects of English in medieval times. So we are not sure. We are simply not sure. Okay. Well, in that case, if there's no further questions, I will be stopping the recording. Let me stop the recording.